Diolch, Llywydd. What representations has the First Minister made to the UK government regarding the provision of additional financial support to assist jobs affected by COVID-19 in Wales?
We take all opportunities to make such representations. The Minister for Economy and Transport met the UK Small Business Minister on Thursday and the Secretary of State for Wales yesterday. A quadrilateral of UK governments takes place tomorrow, where further representations will be made.
First Minister, I'm glad to hear about the frequency of those meetings, because when I first laid this question, I thought to ask you to push the UK government to provide more support for the self-employed and others who still fall outside the job support schemes available, and to push them to guarantee to protect, which they shamefully failed to do in a vote in the House of Commons this week, the £20 uplift to universal credit, which, as we know, goes to some of the poorest working families in Wales. But I did not foresee, First Minister, that in the course of last weekend, the Conservatives would bring forward proposals for a bonfire of workers' rights and terms and conditions, so that in the teeth of a jobs insecurity crisis, which is flowing from both leaving the EU and a global pandemic, the UK government rips away hard-won protections for ordinary working people. So, First Minister, when you next meet Boris Johnson, would you ask him why working people in Ogmore and Wales should ever vote for his party when he plans to make them work longer for less pay and strip away their employment rights?
So I will thank Hugh Davies for that supplementary question. When I next get an opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister, I'll certainly put those points to him. People in Wales have a right to know why promises that were made are so rapidly torn up by this government. We were provided with a promise that workers' rights would be protected as we left the European Union. We see how shallow that promise was. We were promised that Wales would not be a penny worse off through leaving the European Union. That promise has been shredded time and time again, just in recent weeks. We're promised that we will get protections that other parts of the United Kingdom get. Yet when at the weekend, the UK government made very great deal of fuss about the support it was going to give to airports, having decided that travel corridors could no longer be sustained. It turned out that while Bristol will get £8 million, Cardiff Airport is to get nothing from them. Time and time again, this government fulfills that well-known saying, known everywhere in Wales, you can't trust the Tories.
Sir George.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I've had a number of concerns raised with me from those working, or those businesses rather, in the hospitality and tourism sector. And the issue seems to be that the criteria for the Economic Resilience Fund is that staff, they have to employ staff on the PAY system. Now, many in that industry, of course, would point out that that's the very nature of the industry, where they do employ people on a via a self-employed basis, whether they're cleaners or on a short-term basis. Can you agree, First Minister, to have a look at this particular issue in terms of the next round for the Economic Resilience Fund? Because the hospitality and tourism sector need urgent support, and this criteria that could be helping them through the Economic Resilience Fund is preventing them from actually able to accessing the support.
So the tourist and hospitality industry in Wales has the most generous package of support anywhere in the United Kingdom, and millions of pounds have been paid out to those industries and those businesses in order to assist them through the enormous difficulties which the pandemic has created for them. I'm happy, of course, to look at the specific point that the member has raised. We hope here in Wales to be able to announce further support to industries affected by the current state of the pandemic. We'll be assisted in that when it is clear from the UK government how much money we have in order to be able to make those further announcements. The member will know that the Treasury announced that we were getting £227 million coming to Wales as a result of further support in England only the following day to withdraw that announcement and to tell us that we had the money already. Now, when we do have genuine clarity, then we will be in a position to make those further announcements to which we are committed. And I'm happy to say that we'll take up the point that the member has raised in those discussions.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, do you agree with me that the best way to secure jobs during this pandemic is to ensure that all employers affected by measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 receive support? Because I have been contacted by 2 such affected companies in my region, both of which operate amusement arcades and both of which have been refused support because they're classed as gambling businesses. First Minister, these are legal businesses, their taxes are taken and they are suffering the same as any other leisure business. So shouldn't they receive the same support as other leisure businesses? Thank you.
Well, Llywydd, more than £1.7 billion is already in the accounts of businesses here in Wales as a result of the assistance that they have received from the Welsh Government. And there is more still to be claimed, and there are more announcements, as I said, to come with further support. In the end, as members will understand, this is public money. There have to be rules about how claims can be made and who can claim them. It's for businesses who think they have a legitimate claim and can bring themselves within those rules to do so. And provided they can, then those payments will be made. But when you are dispersing public money on the scale that has been necessary during this public health crisis, it has to be done on the basis that that money can be properly accounted for. And when payments are made, there is confidence that they are being made to legitimate businesses for legitimate purposes. And those are the rules that we have here in Wales.
Cwestiwn 2, Neil Hamilton. Cwestiwn 2, Neil Hamilton. I can't see Neil Hamilton on the screen in front of me, so I'll move on to questions by party leaders. And the first leader this afternoon is the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Paul Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, in November, the Welsh Government held 6 cabinet meetings, and yet in the published minutes, a range of issues were discussed, such as the Welsh Government's transport strategy, the building safety white paper, and even broadening the role of firefighters. However, there's not one single item on vaccines or vaccinations tabled or raised for discussion. Given the importance of developing a vaccine strategy and readiness for the deployment of vaccines, why did the Welsh Government not even discuss the matter during the entire month of November? And can you tell us when, as a Cabinet, you did discuss the deployment of vaccines?
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to put on record in front of the Senedd what my colleague, the Health Minister, has already said. The very top priority for this government, the very top priority for the NHS in Wales, is to vaccinate as many people in Wales as quickly and as safely as possible. And the plan that we set out for doing so is being fulfilled, and we are on track to do what we have promised the people of Wales to do. Because the member doesn't read in the minutes every detail of what is discussed at the Cabinet, does not, of course, mean that matters are not discussed. Vaccination and all other aspects of the coronavirus crisis were discussed inside the Welsh Government with senior officials and between ministers right through the month of November, as they have been ever since the first meeting of our group to plan for vaccination took place in June of this year.
Well, I put it to you, First Minister, something as important as the rollout of the vaccinations should have been discussed at Cabinet level and should have been minuted, I would have thought. And the Welsh Government has had months to develop a strategy that ensures people in priority groups all over Wales receive their vaccination. And instead, what we've seen is patchy and inconsistent provision with different levels of progress in different parts of the country. And it's deeply concerning to hear that you defend your go slow policy to prevent vaccinators standing around with nothing to do, when the Welsh Government should be significantly accelerating the administration of vaccines across Wales. And those concerns, of course, have been echoed by BMA Cymru, which, as we've already heard earlier this afternoon, who have said to stop sitting on supplies and to get on with it. Now, whilst other parts of the UK have started vaccinating people in the over 70s category, here in Wales, people in their 80s and some even in their 90s in my constituency are still waiting for their vaccine. So First Minister, can you tell us whether the Welsh Government intends to continue with its go slow approach for the duration of the vaccine period? And if so, how confident are you that people in priority groups will actually receive their first vaccine by mid-February?
So the policy of the Welsh Government is to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible here in Wales. There is no other policy. It is our top priority. It is the top priority of those very hard-working people in our health service who, on top of everything else that we ask of them, are putting in those long hours to make sure that 1,000 people in care homes are being vaccinated every day here in Wales. That by the end of this week, as a minimum, 70% of the over 80s and people living and working in care homes will have been vaccinated in Wales. When I spoke in First Minister's questions last week, Llywydd, I said that our hope was that we would have 100 GP practices vaccinating by the end of last week. We exceeded that we would have 250 GP practices by the end of the month. We will exceed that we would have 35 mass vaccination centres. We're going to have 45. Not only is the Welsh NHS doing everything that we have asked of it, it is doing even more every day. And that means we can be confident that we will deliver vaccination to those top 4 priority groups in line with our plan by the middle of February. It's thanks to those enormous efforts, which I think everybody in this Senedd will want to support.
Well, First Minister, if it's your policy to get the vaccines into people's arms as quickly as possible, why on earth did you actually say that you wanted to roll out the vaccines over a period of time? Because that is just a confusing message. And Llywydd, whilst the Welsh Government may be happy with its go slow approach, the people of Wales are far from happy. They want to see action and they want to see it now. In the meantime, people across Wales are being held prisoner to this virus. People can't meet up with their loved ones, children are without face-to-face learning, and parents are struggling to manage the competing demands of working from home and homeschooling their children. The Welsh Government's slow progress in vaccinating people just increases people's frustration and anger at a time when the Welsh Government should be providing them with hope and doing everything possible to expedite its vaccine delivery. First Minister, will you tell us why Wales has been lagging behind the rest of the UK in rolling out the vaccine to those who actually need it most here in Wales? And can you tell us what urgent action the Welsh Government is taking to seriously accelerate its vaccine delivery to priority groups in Wales so that those who need it the most can receive their vaccine as soon as possible?
Well, so the health spokesperson of the Conservative Party said earlier this afternoon that he wanted to see the vaccine programme succeed. It does not help to make it succeed when the leader of the opposition deliberately and knowingly runs down the efforts of those people who are working so hard to accelerate vaccine here in Wales by describing it all the time as a go slow policy. Let me just say again, because he said he might be confused, he needn't be confused if he'd listened to the first 2 answers I've given him. Let me give him the answer again, and then he need not be confused again in the future. The policy of the Welsh Government is to vaccinate as many people in Wales as quickly and as safely as possible. That is how we have had 162,000 people vaccinated already here in Wales. That is why the pace of vaccination will accelerate again this week. The rate limiting factor in Welsh vaccination is the one that the Health Minister explained in answering the emergency question. It is the rate of supply of the vaccine. We've had 25,000 doses of the Oxford vaccine available to us over each of the last 2 weeks. We expect to have 80,000 doses available to us this week, and we will use all of them. And we will use every drop of the Pfizer vaccine as well before the next delivery of that vaccine arrives here in Wales. That is our determination. That is what people in the NHS are working so hard to achieve. And I know that they would like to have the support of the Leader of the Opposition rather than his continual criticism of them.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Adam Price.
First Minister, if the rate limiting factor is supply, and the Health Minister just said that that was true across all of the nations, what it then explains the differential rate of vaccination in Wales compared to, as we've heard, the UK as a whole, England and Northern Ireland in particular. If it's the same rate of supply across these nations, then why are we seeing a differential rate, a gap between the rate of vaccination in Wales? We haven't really heard, to my mind, a coherent, clear answer to that question. So can you give it to us now?
Well, so the race we are in Wales is the race with the virus. The race is between infection and injection. It's not a race with other countries. We are doing our very best to vaccinate as many people as fast as we can with the supply of vaccine that we have, and that is what we are focused on. The figures between different parts of the United Kingdom will vary over time, as they do with every other aspect of coronavirus. The figures that matter to people in Wales are the figures of vaccination that are going on here, and our determination and our confidence in the plan that we have, which is the same plan as in any other part of the United Kingdom, which is to complete the vaccination of the top 4 priority groups by the middle of February. We are on course to do that, and that is where our efforts are focused.
First Minister, you haven't addressed my question, and it's a reasonable question for me to put to you. And it's a question that my own elderly parents ask me, because they're in the position, they haven't had a date at all. Both of them in their 80s. My father, an 85-year-old ex-miner, has COPD. He's in a clinically vulnerable group, and yet he has had no communication yet to explain to him when he's going to get a vaccination. We have family, like many people in Wales, across different parts of the UK. Many of them have been vaccinated, and they have had a date for the vaccination. And so it's a reasonable question to me to put to you again, First Minister, is what it explains the gap, because it's important for us to know, because if there's a problem there, then we can solve it. I mean, is it the case that we heard the Minister referring to the fact that Wales has higher shares of population in some of the priority groups? Absolutely. We've got higher numbers of people in the over 80s. We've got a significantly higher share of people in the over 65s. So isn't there a case to return to the question of whether we should be getting a share which is greater than our population because of this higher level of need?
Well, I discussed that very issue with the First Ministers of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and with Michael Gove at the Cabinet Office in our meeting on Wednesday of last week. We explored it with the most senior civil servant who is responsible for securing and dispersing supplies of vaccines across the United Kingdom. The point about our age structure was recognised in that conversation, and actions are being taken to make sure that it is taken into account in the supplies of vaccine, which will ramp up here in Wales and across the whole of the United Kingdom. The figures of what happens elsewhere in the United Kingdom, what happens in Wales, will, as I say, change week by week. What we are focused on is making the fastest and most efficient use of every drop of vaccine that comes here in Wales. We've used the Oxford vaccine that's come to us over the last 2 weeks. We will use the 80,000 doses that we have this week and accelerating numbers beyond. And we will use all the Pfizer vaccine that we have before there's another delivery right here in Wales. And the figures that will matter most to people, and I absolutely understand, but there are people who are still waiting to be contacted. Our programme set out that we would offer the vaccine to everybody by the middle of February. Inevitably, there are some people who will still be waiting. I absolutely understand that they will be anxious and waiting to be contacted. The figures that will matter to them are the figures of how the vaccine is being deployed here in Wales. And the figures that are being provided this afternoon by the Health Minister and by myself demonstrate we are on track to deliver what we promised, in line with what is happening across the whole of the United Kingdom.
It's right, of course, for us not to be just parochial, if you like, and comparing ourselves to other nations in these islands, but comparing ourselves to some of the best in the world. And we know, of course, by Sunday, Israel had vaccinated 20% of its population. I think it's now up to 28%. It was initially expected that their program would also suffer a slowdown with Pfizer doses running low, but the Israeli government secured a commitment from the company to bring forward deliveries on the grounds that they would share statistical data in return, giving scientists a case study through which to analyse the impact of the vaccine rollout. That means that they're on target to meet a complete vaccination of their citizens within over 16 within 2 months. First Minister, would you commit to contacting Pfizer to explore avenues for Wales to reach a similar agreement? Or failing this, would you make representations to the UK Prime Minister to pursue a similar path so that we can make this lockdown that we're going through now the last lockdown?
Well, so as the Health Minister explained, we do have direct contact with suppliers of the vaccine, but that is not about the contract that is struck with them. That is done by the UK government on behalf of all 4 nations. I'll raise the points the member has made at my next meeting with the UK government tomorrow, but the negotiations that they carry out on our behalf have succeeded in securing for the United Kingdom, and therefore for Wales, supplies of vaccine that mean that the United Kingdom, and Wales as part of it, is, as you heard the Health Minister explain, at the leading edge of vaccination on the world stage. And the confidence that we have in those supplies comes from our ability to pool our needs and our resources, and to have that then dispersed across the United Kingdom in a way that reflects both our population and the structure of that population.
Question 3, Laura Jones.
Thank you. First Minister, what action is the Welsh Government taking to speed up the rate of the COVID-19 vaccinations in Wales?
Thanks, the member, for that question. So with GPs and pharmacies now delivering COVID vaccinations in Wales, we will step up the contribution of optometrists and dentistry to provide additional resource and capacity as volumes of available vaccine increase.
Thank you. First Minister, you just had the audacity to say earlier in the questioning that you can't trust the Tories, yet the people of Wales have trusted you to deliver this rollout of the vaccine at speed for this, to try and save the lives of the people of Wales, and you've let them down in some fashion. I welcome the comments by the Health Minister earlier, but quite frankly, your comments over the last couple of days to the media are bewildering, and I think that's a good use of word by the Medical Association. Like in England, this whole system in Wales needs to be more transparent. We are in a sprint to save lives. So what is the problem? If you're not holding the vaccines back, Minister, is the system the problem? Why are we so behind? If everyone got the vaccine in December, why are we so different? Why are we so behind? An excuse to just now is delivery is a problem. Well, what are you doing to increase delivery, to speed up the delivery of the vaccine? People are ready and waiting, as Janet Fitzgerald said, to deliver and to vaccinate people. They're wanting to vaccinate more people. And yet the Community Pharmacy of Wales has expressed concern at the lack of engagement they've had from your government to expand the vaccine rollout programme. What's going on, Minister? How can you justify us being so far behind everyone else?
Well, so as I've explained, as the Health Minister has explained, we set out our plans to vaccinate the whole of the top 4 priority groups here in Wales on a common timetable with the rest of the United Kingdom. We are on track to deliver on that promise. We will vaccinate the 4 priority groups by the middle of February. Letters are going out in Wales this week to people aged over 70 and in the previously shielding group to make sure that they are ready to receive the vaccine, which will be available to them in all parts of Wales at the accelerating pace that the figures for the last 3 weeks continue to demonstrate. All of those plans are there. What we need to make sure that we can deliver them is a supply of vaccine that matches our capacity on the ground to deliver it. The delivery mechanisms are there and ready and will be expanded in the way that I explained to the member. We need the supply of vaccine to match that, and then we will make sure that, as we set out in our plan, those 4 top priority groups will all receive the vaccine in line with everywhere else by the middle of February.
I received a request to group questions 3 and 7, and therefore I'll call Darren Miller to ask his supplementary on question 7. Darren Miller.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board, according to a written answer from your own Health Minister, received just 17.3% of the vaccine stock distributed by the Welsh Government to the 8th of January, in spite of having over 22% of the Welsh population to look after. And just last week, GPs in North Wales who were part of the vaccine rollout programme were told to postpone appointments because of delays in delivering vaccine stock. Now, this is coupled with what appears to be a slower rollout of the vaccination programme in North Wales. Can you tell us why North Wales isn't getting its fair share of vaccine stocks, or certainly wasn't up until the 8th of January, and also why GPs can't use the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, given that it has a 5-day shelf life, even after being taken out of deep cold storage? Because as I understand it, that's one of the reasons why the ramp up hasn't been quicker than it currently is in North Wales.
So the member is quite wrong in his description of the position in North Wales. By 8 AM yesterday, 31,095 citizens in North Wales had been vaccinated, and that is by some way the highest number of any health board anywhere in Wales. So far from being held back, actually the actions of the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board are putting them in the lead of vaccination here in Wales. And that is because of the amazing response that we have had from the GP community and the community pharmacy community. In North Wales, all 98 primary care practices in Betsy Cadwaladr have indicated that they wish to engage and deliver the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, Darren Miller is right that we had hoped to receive 26,000 more doses of the Oxford vaccine than will come our way this week. And that has meant that some plans that were there in North Wales to accelerate still further vaccination have had to be held back. The good news is that the UK government assure us that we will get that supply next week, in addition to what we were already expecting next week. So that will be a very temporary sort of downturn in the vaccine that we would otherwise expect. GPs in their own surgeries are much better equipped to deliver the Oxford vaccine than the Pfizer vaccine. For reasons that many members will know, the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored in very particular conditions, not simply of temperature, but in other conditions as well. It means that Pfizer vaccines are suited for the mass vaccination centres, 3 of them already in North Wales, for the hospital-based vaccination centres, 3 of those in North Wales, and that the GP community will focus on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. The success of that strategy lies behind the very considerable success that we are seeing in North Wales, and which I know the member will want to recognise and to celebrate.
Jack Sargent.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I was very pleased to visit the mass vaccination centre at Rainbow Hospital in Deeside last week and see firsthand the mammoth effort being undertaken to roll out the vaccination programme. And I want to take this time today to put on record my thanks and to pay tribute to all of the staff and all of the volunteers in Betsy for their hard work. We have heard some worrying news this weekend about the delays in the supply of vaccines. First Minister, will these affect the Welsh Government's ambitious target to offer everyone in the first priority groups a vaccine by mid-February? And can the First Minister reassure me that every community pharmacy that expresses interest will be administering the vaccine across North East Wales and in particular in Flintshire?
Well, I thank Jack Sargent for that supplementary question, Llywelyn, for what he said about the efforts which he has seen himself on the ground by people going far beyond what their contract would expect, working in the evenings, working at weekends, doing everything they can to make sure that as many people as quickly as possible are vaccinated here in Wales. The problems that have been reported with the vaccine supply are just a warning to us that supply chain does have fragilities in it. We were due 4 batches of the Oxford vaccine to Wales this week. One of those batches, very late in the process, was identified as needing some further attention and therefore couldn't come to us this week. Members will have read some of the concerns that have been expressed elsewhere in Europe about issues at the Belgian factory of the Pfizer company. I think Pfizer has since confirmed that there are some issues at that factory and that will have some impact on its ability to ramp up supplies in the way that it had anticipated. These are problems, however, that do not simply affect Wales. They affect all those places that are relying on the vaccine coming through in the way that we would all wish, and the impact of the Oxford vaccine issues wasn't just felt in Wales, it was felt in other parts of the United Kingdom as well. We remain confident, to go to Jack's point, we remain confident and we will deliver the promise we made that those top 4 priority groups will be vaccinated by mid-February. And the contribution of community pharmacy will not simply be in pharmacies themselves, but will be made by community pharmacists helping at mass vaccination centres, where the skills and the abilities that they have built up through, for example, the flu vaccination programme will be put to very good use in making sure that those vaccines are delivered as quickly as they possibly can be to people here in Wales.
Bevan Syed.
Diolch. I've had quite a lot of communication from people who are anxious because they don't feel that the government is being proactive enough in telling them who is eligible and when they will get that information through. I've even had some comments and some phone calls to my office as we've been speaking here from over 80-year-olds saying they've had to chase appointments with the GP. I hear what you're saying, that they will find out in February, but I think people need to know loud and clear exactly when they will be having that information to allay any anxieties they may have. I've also been concerned with a lady who contacted me in my region who is over 80, but was told to go to a centre over 30 miles away. That simply is not acceptable. What can you do to allay her fears that she will get another vaccine opportunity at a closer place so that she can be protected from this most terrible virus?
So I was going to thank the member for those important points. I believe that all health boards have written directly to all residents in their area, setting up the plans at a health board level for the delivery of the vaccine. And the Welsh Government's plan was, of course, published over a week ago. We'll rehearse that extensively here this afternoon. At the very local level, where GPs are vaccinating, then the information has to come from the practice because of the way in which it is able to organise delivery of the vaccine in the most rapid way that it can. The individual that the member mentioned, who was offered a vaccine 30 miles away, will have been offered it because that was the first possible opportunity to get vaccine to that individual. But of course, if you're age over 80, travel will not always be possible for you, and in those circumstances that individual will definitely get an offer from a much more local provider, whether it's her GP or whether it's in a community pharmacy setting. But the offer will have been made because of everything we have heard and the other people that the member mentioned, people wanting to know and wanting, of course, to get the vaccine as fast as possible. And the offer will have been made because that would have been the first possible opportunity to allow that person to get the vaccine that they will want. When it isn't possible for them to take up that offer, then a different offer will be made to them by the Welsh NHS, and one that they will be in a position to take up.
Alan Davis.
I'm grateful, Presiding Officer, and thank you for your answers on this, First Minister. I visited the mass vaccination centre which opened in Ewr last Thursday, and I have to say it was an inspiring and uplifting experience to see the enthusiasm of the nursing staff of the health service workers working alongside the RAF personnel who were there managing the process was something which was really uplifting to see, together with the people overwhelmingly over 80 years old who were being vaccinated, and the sense of purpose of those people walking into the general offices to receive their vaccination and then feeling so confident walking out. And you know, First Minister, what people in Blaenau Gwent want is to see politicians working together to put people first and not playing politics with their lives. That's what people want, and that's what they tell me. And what they want to see is how we can expand and quicken the pace of the vaccination programme when GPs and pharmacies are able to deliver the vaccine in their own community close to home. Can you this afternoon guarantee that GPs and pharmacies will be having doses of a vaccine and will be able to supplement the mass vaccination centres to ensure that the people we want to take care of have a vaccine and are able to feel safe?
So thank Andreas very much for that supplementary question, and I agree with him completely. What people in Wales expect is a genuine Team Wales effort to get this enormous vaccination programme done as fast and as effectively as we can. And it is inspiring. It is inspiring when you talk to and hear from those frontline staff who are going far beyond what could reasonably be expected of them to make sure that the programme is a success. And let me just give the member just a couple of figures to bear out what he asked. Because in Gwent, this week, just gone, 14 GP practices had already commenced clinics using the Oxford vaccine. By the end of this week, 70 of the 74 Gwent practices will have received vaccine and will be carrying out immunisations in their local communities. 14 last week, 70 this week, and 72 next week. I think that just demonstrates the amazing commitment of our GP and primary care community, the speed at which that is being mobilised locally, and I think that will speak louder to people in Wales who want to see this succeed than anything that I am likely to say, and certainly louder than any of those who seek to run their efforts down.
Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you've talked about the need to go slow with vaccinating people, but nobody else seems able to understand this, including the BMA. And 3 other ministers, rather than explaining the thinking behind the go slow, have simply come out and decided that this is what is happening. Vaughan Gething, Kirsty Williams and Jeremy Miles are all saying that the vaccine is being rolled out as fast as possible. In other words, they are, all of them, totally contradicting your publicly stated policy. I wonder if you can explain why this is happening. We now understand from your response earlier today that the vaccination programme has not even been discussed at Cabinet level. Does your Cabinet understand your policy on vaccinating the Welsh people? Does anyone understand it?
Well, Llywydd, it would no doubt improve the quality of discussion here in the Senedd if the member were to just listen to what has been said already. The Cabinet discusses all aspects of our coronavirus response throughout the coronavirus period, including vaccination. Let me put that point clearly to him so that he need not make that mistake another time. As to the pace of the rollout, let me just say it again. The policy of the Welsh Government is to deliver vaccination as fast as we can for as many people as we can, as safely as we can in all parts of Wales. Next time he quotes our policy, I look forward to him quoting that, because he's heard it from me, and he's heard it from me repeatedly during the afternoon. There really is no excuse for the members' confusion.
Evan David.
Yesterday, sorry, can you hear me?
No, we can hear you. You can carry on.
Yeah, sorry, it was a technical issue there. Yesterday, the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board confirmed that all GPs in my constituency will be in receipt of the vaccine today and tomorrow. That's up from 13 in the whole board area last week. The vaccine centre at Ystrad is open indefinitely to help hit the 4 priority targets by mid-February. And last week, nearly 11,000 people in our area were vaccinated. I've had some concerns raised with me by residents who've had relations in England about what they perceive to be a postcode lottery happening there. And it's in all of our interests to ensure that the whole of the UK is vaccinated as soon as possible. I'd want to recognise after this past few days the progress that's been made in the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area. And would the First Minister therefore recognise that and the progress being made in Caerphilly?
So, well, I absolutely recognise the astonishing efforts which have been made in the Aneurin Bevan area by staff of the Health Board and by people who are at the front line. That's particularly commendable, Llywydd, I think, given that only weeks ago the level of coronavirus in the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area was amongst the highest in the whole of Wales, and the Health Board has had to deal not simply with vaccination, but dealing with all those people who have fallen ill with this virus and the demand that has placed on health services and hospital services, particularly in the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area. As of today, Llywydd, I'm very pleased to say numbers in the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area continue to decline because of the efforts that residents, particularly residents of the Caerphilly areas we've discussed here in the Senedd previously, Llywydd, the enormous efforts they have made during the lockdown to help us to get those numbers heading in the right direction. And the Health Board has taken every advantage of the opportunities it now has to mobilise its primary care community to deliver vaccination in the way that the member has already described, and at the scale that will be evident in the Aneurin Bevan area over the week ahead. Now, I repeat what I said earlier, Llywydd, that I am focused on what happens here in Wales and delivering on the promise that we made. But everywhere in the United Kingdom, you will find people raising concerns that people who are younger than themselves have been offered vaccination while they themselves are still waiting for it. You will have seen what Theresa Coffey, the Cabinet Minister in London, has said yesterday about the part of England that she represents not having had a fair share of the vaccine available in England. All communities are anxious to make sure that they are getting everything that can be done. That is true here in Wales, and people in the Aneurin Bevan area can be very proud indeed of everything that their health service is doing on their behalf.
Cwestiwn 4, John Griffiths.
What is the First Minister's current assessment of COVID-19 in the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board area?
Well, Llywydd, we continue to see a trend of reducing incidence rates and test positivity rates across all local authority areas within the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board area. However, numbers do remain high, and our NHS capacity is still very stretched. All efforts must continue to drive those rates down further.
First Minister, the vaccination programme is crucial in saving lives, in reducing pressure on our National Health Service with all the benefits that brings for COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 health services, and in allowing restrictions to be eased for a return of economic activity, our schools, and more normal living. Understandably, expectations of the rollout are very high, and my constituents want to see every effort made to vaccinate as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. I know you, First Minister, from what you said today and previously, that you are very committed to this. So is the Welsh Government collectively, and of course, so is our NHS. First Minister, will you reassure my constituents who have contacted me here in Newport East that vaccination will proceed with the utmost urgency, with the top 4 priority groups offered a vaccine by mid-February and the other groups following as quickly as possible to get us out of this terrible crisis in the shortest possible time?
So well, I can do no better than to echo exactly what John Griffith said in his supplementary question. The policy of the Welsh Government is to vaccinate as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And the efforts we've already discussed here this afternoon amongst healthcare staff in Gwent just demonstrate the commitment that they have to exactly that policy. Now, I've set out already, Llywydd, the very rapid increase in the number of GP practices in the members' constituency who will be delivering the vaccine this week. But that is on top of the 4 mass vaccination centres, which are currently operating in the Gwent area. And as I know John Griffiths will be aware, a large mass vaccination centre opened in Newport yesterday ahead of schedule. And that is typical of what is happening across Wales. As I said in an earlier answer, Llywydd, when I was here last week, I was setting out our ambitions for mass vaccination centres, GP practices, and we're exceeding those ambitions, as we are in Newport, because of all the efforts that are being made. And because of that, the local population in the members' constituency can have confidence that the plans we set out will be delivered, that they will be delivered with urgency and with determination, and that when we complete the first 4 priority groups, those efforts will continue and expand further as we drive our way down the 9 top priority groups and then move on to the rest of the population.
Question 5, Delyth Jewel.
Yes, Llywydd. What assessment has the First Minister made of the impact of an increase in council tax on the finances of people in South Wales East who are facing financial difficulties?
So in recognition of the financial difficulties facing individuals and public services, the Welsh Government's draft budget provides an uplift of 3.8% in revenue funding for local authorities at a time when inflation is rising at 0.6%, and when our own budget in 2021-22 will be more than 3% lower in real terms than a decade ago.
I thank the First Minister for that answer and for those points. However, many families and individuals in my region have faced real financial hardships, even though they don't qualify for council tax support as it is available. A recent report by the Bevan Foundation found that nearly 1/4 of households have seen their incomes fall since the start of the pandemic, while at the same time they've seen their living costs increase. It found that 1 in 5 households with incomes of less than £20,000 a year have had to cut back on food, on heating, electricity and water. We know that council tax is the most regressive tax we have because it places the biggest burden on low-income households, and we've had confirmation that councils, including one in my region in Caerphilly, intend to raise council tax by 4%. And the Labour Party leader in England, Keir Starmer, said it is absurd to expect hard-pressed families to pay more and called on the UK government to cover the proposed increases in England. Will the Welsh Government do that in Wales?
Well, so if the UK government provides funding to allow that to happen, then we will get, we assume, although that's an assumption that becomes more questionable these days, that we will get a Barnett consequential of that decision, and that would allow us to do more to help families here in Wales. The member will know that, unlike in England, our council tax benefit system operates across the whole of Wales. The Welsh Government put £22 million over and above the money that came from the UK Government when that benefit was devolved to us, and that hundreds of thousands of households in Wales benefit from that provision. Because of a take-up campaign that the Welsh Government with local authorities mounted earlier last year, we've had 10,000 more additional households apply since the end of March to benefit from the council tax benefit, and that is because of the pressures on household incomes that the member quite rightly sets out. We use every opportunity we have to provide services and financial help that leaves money in the pockets of families who otherwise would have to pay for things themselves. Where more help comes from the UK Government, we will deploy that to help those families further. In the meantime, I go back to a point that yw'r Davies made, Llywyd, in the very first question this afternoon, that the biggest help that the UK Government can provide, and the most urgent help it needs to provide, is to guarantee that the £20 a week that the poorest families in the land now get when they're on universal credit continues beyond the 31st of March this year. Without that, the hard-pressed families that Dereth Gyngor has referred to will be £1,000 a year worse off, and there's no family in Wales living on those sort of incomes that can possibly afford to be in that position.
Cwestiwn 6, Helen Mary Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the level of child poverty in Llanelli?
I thank the member for that question, Llywydd. The pandemic is predicted to increase child poverty in Llanelli and across Wales. That impact would be made worse by premature withdrawal of the job retention scheme and any refusal to maintain the £20 universal credit weekly uplift beyond the end of March.
I'm grateful to the First Minister for his answer. In an earlier answer, he told us, and I would not disagree, that we can't trust the Tories. And when it comes to providing support for our poorest families and our poorest children, I don't believe we can trust them either. The First Minister makes reference to the threat of the withdrawal of the £20 uplift for universal credit. But given what he said to us about not trusting the Tories, can I ask him again to reconsider his decision not to seek the devolution of benefits, as has been recommended by a committee of this Senedd and by independent research and think tanks, because that would enable us, despite the financial challenges, to develop a system of our own that would be fairer when it came to supporting families in these positions. And in the meantime, further to exchanges that we had last week, will he consider the practicality of extending free school meals to all those children whose families are in receipt of universal credit? If we can't get the devolution of the main part of the benefit system, is it not time for his government to support those families in ways that are within this Sened's current competence?
Well, Llywyd, I thank Helen Mary Jones for those further questions. I am persuaded by much of what was said in the report provided by the committee of the Senedd chaired by John Griffiths about exploring the devolution of the administration of aspects of the benefit system. That was a very helpful report, and it helps to shape the thinking of the Welsh Government. And I'm very happy to go on exploring that with members who are of a similar persuasion. As to the point that the member makes about free school meals, the changes that we have made to free school meals entitlement during this term will extend eligibility to thousands more children over the next couple of years. Plaid Cymru's policy is to provide free school meals to every child in a family where universal credit is being claimed. I set out for the member last week that if those families have 2 children per family, that's a cost of £67 million a year. and that would rise to over £100 million a year. Those are the costings that I have been provided by officials in the Welsh Government, whose job it is to help us administer the help we currently provide to families receiving free school meals. Those are choices that governments can make. But the last questioner, Llywydd, asked me to find Welsh Government money to help families who struggle because of the council tax. Plaid Cymru has a policy of providing £35 a week for free school meals children, again at a cost of many millions of pounds. It has a policy of providing free childcare from 12 months of age at a cost of £950 million. It has a policy of free social care for everyone in Wales. When parties put forward policies, they have to be able to credibly explain to people not why something is desirable, but why it is also achievable within the resources that the Welsh Government has. And I'm afraid when you begin to add up that long list of no doubt desirable things, I think very many question marks begin to emerge about their deliverability.
Question 8, Mark Drakeford.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's proposals for constitutional developments in Wales?
Llywydd, I set out our proposals for Wales's constitutional arrangements in the Reforming Our Union paper published at the end of last year. We have been clear that Wales's future is best secured through a powerful and entrenched devolution settlement within a successful United Kingdom.
It's a fascinating document, but First Minister, we're currently seeing the impact of vaccinations being devolved. What would it be like if, as you want, you also get your hands on justice or can borrow money with no restraint? When devolution is a process which only ever moves in one direction, towards independence, how can people become comfortable with it? If there is no devolution settlement, if it's not stable, won't we sooner or later have to choose between abolishing this place or sleepwalking to independence?
Llywydd, well, from a member who I believe is now in the 5th political party that he's joined since the last election, lectures on stability seem a little far-fetched. The way to debate Wales's constitutional future is to set out different propositions, to put them to the public, to make arguments in favour of them. The Welsh Labour Party and the government that I represent will go on arguing that Wales's constitutional future is best secured through a form of radical federalism in which the dispersal of sovereignty to 4 different directly elected parliaments in the United Kingdom is recognised, but where we choose to pool that sovereignty in order to more effectively secure common goals. An entrenched devolution settlement, but a successful United Kingdom. That is the ground that the Welsh Labour Party occupies, not the increasingly strident English nationalism of the Conservative Party here in Wales, and those candidates, it appears, willing to select on the basis that they will, to quote one of them, take a sledgehammer to the Senedd and come here to campaign for the destruction of devolution. That appears to be the viewpoint of the modern Conservative Party in Wales, but nor will we support the idea of independence, a 19th century idea to a 21st century problem. The real future, the constitutional future that the bulk of people in Wales want to see is proper, powerful, entrenched devolution with the advantages that continued membership of the United Kingdom brings to Wales.
Finally, question now, Jenny Rathbone.
Thank you very much, Llywydd. What are the implications for Wales of the UK government's decision to cancel UK participation in the European Erasmus programme?
So with the decision by the Westminster Government not to participate in Erasmus Plus means that the benefits of a highly valued programme are being denied to our young people. For the first time this year, organisations and institutions in Wales will no longer be able to submit new applications to Erasmus Plus in an act of cultural vandalism.
Thank you, First Minister. I would agree with you. It is indeed an act of cultural vandalism. But one of the most disappointing aspects of the UK government's decision to turn its back on Europe and the opportunities that Erasmus offered for young people, particularly those from disadvantaged families, is that my understanding is that the touring scheme, which they hope to replace it with, does not allow youth services to nominate people who may not be taking the academic path on their future career path, but those who need to nevertheless broaden their horizons, understand what the innovations are that already exist in Europe and which could be strengthening their capacity to run successful businesses here in Wales. So what options are now open to young people to engage with their global responsibilities in an informed way?
Well, Llywydd, I think that's a very good question from Jenny Rathbone. Let me repeat what I said here once before, Llywydd. The touring scheme is an English scheme being imposed on the rest of the United Kingdom. It is an early example of the way in which the Conservative Party intends to use the Internal Market Act, because instead of providing money to Wales for us to discharge our devolved responsibilities for higher and further education and the youth service, this is to be a scheme imposed on us, funded directly from Whitehall with no reference at all to the particular needs, circumstances and democratic preferences of people here in Wales. And Jenny Rathbone is absolutely right. We have made greater use of the Erasmus programme for young people through the youth service than any other part of the United Kingdom. It's been a distinctively Welsh feature of the use that we have made of it, and that's now going to be denied to us. And that is part of the disgrace of the UK government's failure to negotiate proper participation in the scheme, and then to compound that by imposing on us a scheme that simply doesn't meet the needs and preferences of people here in Wales. We will now have to build up, in answer to the member's final part of the question, those schemes that we already have in operation in Wales. The SEREN programme that sends young people to Yale, Harvard, Chicago and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the scholarships that we promote through Global Wales, the MIT Global Teaching Laboratories, in which 25,000 learners in Wales participated in 2020. And Llywydd, when I met the German ambassador a week ago, he very positively put to me the prospects for bilateral arrangements between young people in Wales and young people in Germany outside the arrangements that the UK government is contemplating imposing on us. So we will pursue those bilateral opportunities, those opportunities we've already invested in, to try and make good the fact that young people in Wales are now to be denied opportunities that generations of young people have been able to enjoy up until now, and were quite certainly promised to them by the UK government and have failed to be delivered in the deal that they have struck with the European Union.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf felly yw'r datganiad a chyhoeddiad busnes, a dwi yn